Hi, I'm Allison Payette from ThreeSistersFabric.com. I would like to show you what I call the ABC method of borders and corners. That stands for Allie's Border Corner Method. It makes interlocking Victorian feathers and other borders as easy as ABC. This video is being demoed using my Abundant Feathers pattern. Everyone loves switchback voluminous feathers, but not everyone loves to put the corners to the borders. Let me show you how easy it actually is. First of all, you'll notice that I've loaded Abundant Feathers border pattern and also the Abundant Feathers corner pattern into Creative Studio. Each of those are loaded in there and I have not made any adjustments to them. They're in there exactly as they're designed. You'll also notice that I created a quilt group called Border, Top, and Bottom. That's because I only like to do borders once if I can get away with it. So I'm going to set this up for the top of the quilt, and then when I roll down to the bottom of the quilt, I will come back to this quilt group and reuse this pattern by simply rotating it to work for the bottom of the quilt. That is a key point in doing borders and corners. You have to remember, never flip borders and corners. Only rotate them, especially and specifically for the borders that run in a clockwise direction around a quilt, or sometimes they run in a counterclockwise direction. But generally speaking, borders and corners run in a clockwise direction around a quilt. And what we want to do is strictly rotate them, never flip them, because it makes it so they don't line up properly with each other. For the example's sake, I am going to place a couple of patterns on the screen exactly as they are designed using the repeat pattern mode. I'm putting one corner and then I'm putting a border pattern on. What I want to do is I just simply want to show you how they line up if they are totally unadjusted, unchanged, unaltered from the original design. Basically, I'm just going to zoom in here and I'm going to make the starts line up as close as they possibly can. There you go. And then I'm switching over right now. I have the purple handles on and I want to switch over to the end snap handles. I'm going to hit F11 on my keyboard and that changes me over to where I'm able to snap the ends together. Right now I'm on grid snap. I want to be on end snap. This little E down here, I can toggle it by clicking that. I can depress it, or I can hit the E on my keyboard and that will make it so the endpoints snap together. Did you hear that click? That click means those ends snap together. Then all I have to do is hit the F8 button and I can renumber my patterns so that this pattern starts first, and it always starts with a 0, and then I will click on that one next. I hit F8 to accept, and now my start is here, my end is there, and it will run in one continuous motion. And see how nice those connect together? No problems at all. The problem comes in with borders and corners is when we need to start to alter the size. Abundant Feathers is designed to run at 8 inches. As it is designed, the border and corner will match up together perfectly, but it's going to be a rare case that you need it to be exactly 8 inches and exactly the width that the border was designed at. So I'm going to show you how we go ahead and adjust that. Let me delete these patterns. Now, take a look at the border corner and the regular border pattern. If you notice, let me get out of repeat pattern setup here and get back to my pattern details right here. Okay, if you notice, the border height is at 8 inches. The border pattern height is at 8 inches. And that's what's the critical dimension for us. I really don't care how wide this pattern is right now. Okay, and the corner height is 15.26 inches high. Basically, there's a very easy way to find a modifier, I call it. We have a little PDF. It's a little tiny piece of paper that we have taped to the monitor of our Statler Stitcher. And it has a very simple formula on it. It says BCH divided by BH times NBH equals NBCH. Does that make sense to you? Probably not. But what all that stands for, okay, and what we do, and I will show you a picture of it. Here it comes on the screen right now. Okay, what I simply do is I take the border corner height, BCH, border corner height, and I'm going to pull up my calculator. Right now it's 15.26, and then I divide that by my border height, and my border height is 8 inches. Then I multiply that answer by my new border height, NBH. And I want my new border height to be 9.5 inches. I have a 10-inch quilt border mapped out over here. And so take off a 1/4 inch on either side for margins, and that leaves me at 9.5 inches. That number that I just got is the new border corner height. So I'll just go in here, I'm going to say copy, and then I'm going to paste. Always make sure freeze aspect is on, but I'm going to paste the new dimension. That fixes the corner. I'll change this to 9.5, and that fixes my border. Now I know the two of these, I used a modifier basically. You didn't even find out what the modifier was. It didn't really matter. I just divided the corner height by the border, multiplied it times my new height, and had my answer. It was that quick and that easy. And then I was able to change the patterns in the pattern default area so that they still will match up exactly as they're designed. But they're made for a 9.5 inch border now. Then what I do is I use repeat patterns, and I put a corner on the screen. I use repeat pattern, and I put a second corner on the screen. Then I simply take, and I'm going to go back to my purple handles here, and I put one over here, and I'm going to rotate it. Remember, like I said, we never flip them, we only rotate them. This corner pattern was designed for the upper right corner of a quilt. So when I rotate it 90 degrees, that gets it ready for the upper left corner of the quilt. Then I'm just going to zoom in and position these right where I want them to be. Okay, that's pretty close right there. I know I want about a 1/4 inch margin, so I'm kind of just estimating here. Scroll over and do this one. I'm placing it right within a 1/4 inch of the outside margins. Okay, my corners are in position. Now the next thing I know, I have this grid set up at 10-inch blocks here so that I was able to map out a pretend quilt. I'm not on my Statler right now, I'm actually on a desktop computer in standalone mode. But these are 10-inch blocks, and so I know that I need about 1, 2, 3, 40 inches worth of borders here. This quilt is a 70-inch wide quilt that I mapped out. So then I go over to my borders here, and I go into repeat pattern mode again. My total width is about 17 inches, and I want to get about 40 inches worth of borders, so maybe 3 repeats. It's always better to shrink the borders to fit. I want more repeats than I actually need. It's not, unless it's pretty close, it's not a good idea to stretch feathers to fit. It's much better to shrink them to fit in between the corners. So I said okay, and my borders just plopped on the screen. Now I'm going to draw a box around these. If you're not using CS 3.0, I highly recommend that you go ahead and upgrade. The features are incredible. And by taking a look at my size, I can tell that I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close to exactly what I need to be. Let's zoom in a little bit further over here. And I'm going to choose to match this side up here, just as close as I can get it. I'm going to switch to the end snap. That's F11 on my keyboard. My E is still depressed down here, so I know it will snap my ends together. Did you hear that click? I know they're snapped. Now I am going back. Notice I'm not going to snap these ends together. If I just take this end snap at this point over here on the right hand side and I snap it in there, the end snap feature freezes the aspect of the border. And by shrinking that in width, it will also shrink the height of the border, and we do not want to shrink the height. We want that height to remain 9.5 inches. If you want to send a recommendation to Statler, tell them to please change the end point handles so that it doesn't freeze the aspect. That would be so wonderful if it would just shrink the width. Or better yet, that we'd have an option to change that, to turn the aspect for freeze off on there. So I am going back to my purple handles because I only want to shrink this side right here. I'm just going to shrink my width. Right down there, just about as close. I'm zooming in and I want to get it as close to the start and end as I possibly can. Then I go back with F11 to my end snaps, click, and I snap them together. Look at that. Do you see how forgiving that is? Okay, there's a little bit right here that you may want to surf, a little bit of a tail that's going to hang over, but that is pretty incredibly close. Okay, the only thing I have to do next, because I put this corner on first and I put that corner on second, and then these borders in, is I need to renumber. To renumber, what I like to do, because all these went in at one time, I like to combine this group right here. I combine the group into one, and then when I hit F8 to renumber, I have this one to renumber, I have this one to renumber, and then I have the last one to renumber. I hit F8 to accept, and now that border and those corners will sew out all in one fluid motion. It is that easy.